They're profit-hungry, greedy bastards. Also, I love that I've got a really wholesome cup of peppermint sleepy tea and you've got a glass of G&T.
I mean, you know what the beauty about this friendship is, and also having you as a podcast co-host, is that I can text you and say, hey, listen, can we record a half an hour later? I'm about to rent a van, drive to a stranger's house and pick up a sofa, and you wouldn't question it at all.
No, I'm like, just another day in the life of Marie. I completely understand needing a G&T after that, though.
So me and my dad just recreated the scene from Friends where Ross tries to get a sofa and he refuses to pay the delivery fee. This was basically us today. I've been like living in my new place for a while now. I still don't have a sofa. I've been using an old camping bed as a sofa. I found one secondhand, and now the question was, how the fuck were we gonna get it here? The only option I could find that was affordable, because I tried delivery options, but they were like 3 times the price of the actual sofa. So I was like, that does not make sense.
You might as well get it yourself.
Obviously, we're still quite new. We're not sponsored by these. But I am honestly very impressed by the service, because like I discovered this, like it's called Hertz 24/7, where we basically rent a van on an hourly rate. And it's all through an app. So we didn't have to see a single person. So I just like filled out an application on this app. And then we rented this van, the world's biggest van. You could have fit the entire contents of my apartment in it. We could have fit like 20 billion sofas in there. And then we drove a 20-minute drive. And then because of Portugal, like into the Portuguese countryside, got the sofa and then had to carry it up 3 flights of stairs. I have to say, I couldn't resist. I did have to shout a few times, pivot.
I'd be disappointed if you didn't at this point. 3 flights of stairs, though. How sweaty were you?
Oh, I mean, this has to be one of the most stressful experiences of my life. This van was so big, and my dad has never driven in Portugal before. So this was a first-time experience, and I don't think I can't remember I don't think he even remembers the last time he'd driven a van this big.
I really admire the commitment to getting secondhand furniture, especially from you recently. Marie's kind of finding secondhand furniture and doing it up, and this, I just really admire you for it. You put in a lot of time into this and a lot of stress.
I mean, yeah, part of me wishes I'm not like how I am, because, I mean, obviously this was also a price issue, because this was way cheaper than buying even the cheapest sofa from IKEA. But then it's also, of course, like, there's so much stuff in the world. I want to like, when I moved into this apartment, and it's the first time I lived in an unfurnished apartment, I am determined to only furnish it with secondhand furniture. The sofa really started to question my resolve, because it was just like, looks like it wasn't going to happen, because it's just not only the transport issue. I live on the 3rd floor and I'm usually by myself. So while my dad was here, we finally got it done. But like, part of me, I was like, why am I like this? But also, like, you get yourself in such weird situations, because I literally drove to a stranger's house and just went, hey, give me your sofa. It's just like, I could have been murdered. One of those things, like, you just go to a stranger's house, and like, luckily he was a pretty chill dude.
I admire your commitment. I really, really do.
The life of sustainability. But yeah, I think that is my sustainable win for the week, the month, the year.
That's a pretty good one. I'm proud of you. That really is one of your alliterations at the start, the trials and tribulations.
People still haven't picked up on that I do a different alliteration every single time.
I, for one, really appreciate the effort that you put in. When you read it out, I'm just sitting there going, ooh, that's a good one. Love alliteration. I've got quite a light-hearted, I've got a sustainable work in progress. Does that count?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's our podcast. We make the rules.
Oh, yeah. Okay, this is the thing now. Sustainable work in progress. My friends have just moved to New Zealand because they clearly hate me and wanted to go to the other side of the world to get away from me. But good for them, not bitter. And obviously, they kind of just got up and went. So they needed to get rid of a lot of stuff, sell a lot of stuff. And I kind of jumped in and went, what are you doing with your clothes? And they said, oh, don't know, like donate, get rid. And I was like, look, can I please find new homes for your clothes? I just want to make sure they go to a good home, like they're whether we sell or swap, whatever. And also it takes the stress off you because you've left it last minute. And they were like, that's really kind. And I was like, no worries. I enjoy this because I'm weird. Anyway, I didn't realize how many clothes they had. There was just bags and bags of clothes turned up at my house, which was really funny because this was the last time I saw them. So I was half crying while carrying these huge bags of clothes because I know I'm not going to see them for a year. Anyway, sifting through them, and I'm doing a good job and I'm actually really enjoying it, and I'm proud of myself for taking on this project. I definitely don't have too much spare time. I'm doing this out of the goodness of my own heart. And also I sift through and see if there's anything I like. But I've really enjoyed it. And actually, I've even had friends over to browse the clothes and gone, is there anything you like? Try it on. Like, I've been making it into almost like a rescue home for clothes. Like, I treat the clothing like it's a pet going, this t-shirt needs a new home. Could you be the right fit for this t-shirt? So yeah, I've really enjoyed it. It's become quite like a social thing. So yeah, I hope Mark and Jenna really appreciate my rehoming efforts.
That's amazing. Like, I think like with that, I always wanted, do you know the movie, The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants?
Yes.
I always think, could we do something like this? Where like, well, I mean, I've started doing something similar on my page of like clothing love stories where I write like a little love letter to my clothes.
Oh, that's sweet. I love that idea.
Do like a little reel of them. I need to do more. So far, I've only done 2. But like, I feel like we can do that more, like where people just, I think maybe you can do that. You know, when you like people like, because I used to work in an animal shelter. So when they adopt a pet, they get like a little bio and stuff like that. Maybe you can do that with the clothes.
I would love that. I was talking to someone and I said, oh, I wish like on Vinted and Depop where you sell clothes, people did the bio like they do on rescue animal shelter websites where it's like, my name's Lucky the dog and I'm looking for an owner who wants to look after me, and like that kind of thing. Can you imagine like putting a dress on it? It's like, needs a new home, likes going out for drinks, likes a party, likes a fun time. Like, it just gives the clothes a personality and makes you value them a bit more. I just think it's a really sweet idea. If anyone has any nice stories about their clothes and just wants to write in and tell them how much they love a particular top and what memories you have with it, I would love that. I think we need to start doing that more. I could write a whole essay on my trusty black turtleneck that we did an episode on that makes me look like The Rock. That's been with me through so many things, so many different experiences. My love letter would definitely be for my black turtleneck. Iconic.
Because we spoke about this a lot of times before. And the unfortunate situation is we live in a society where people view clothes as disposable. And I think you've also perfectly set up the topic for today's episode. Before we dive in, a quick disclaimer. Here on the pod, we use secondary sources. The idea of the podcast is the average consumer making the best decision with the information that is publicly available to them. Consider this a literature review of all the articles, books I have read in preparation for this episode. I am extremely dyslexic. Yes, that is the technical term. So it helps hearing facts out loud. We hope this episode will inspire you to do your own research. A full reference list is available. If you were listening to this on YouTube, you can find it in the description down below, or you can find it linked in our link tree. But I also wanted to issue a bit of a content warning, because today's episode will be talking about horrific disasters that have occurred in the garment industry. When writing these episodes, I take massive inspirations from shows like Last Week Tonight, and when John Oliver tackles a heavy subject, he promises a heartwarming payoff or distracts everyone with his whimsical eyebrows. And even though I think my eyebrow game is on par with John Oliver, alas, this podcast is audio only, and we don't have HBO's budget to hijack a Bird of the Century contest. I'm just gonna leave you with this. Information is power, no matter how shocking it is, as we answer today's question, who made my clothes?
Marie, that was amazing. And yes, I like her. I think your eyebrows were amazing. I've always admired them. That's all I look at when I look at you on the screen.
With that, hello everyone. Welcome to Two Girls, One Reusable Cup, your sustainable support group, where we navigate the sins and wins of living a low-waste lifestyle. I'm Marie, and as always, I am joined by the lovely Beth.
Hi, everyone.
It is Fashion Revolution Week. On the 24th of April marks the 11-year anniversary of the Rana Plaza tragedy. Today, we'll look back through the injustices of the fashion industry, the lead up, and the aftermath, and what progress, if any, has been made in the last decade. My first question to you, Beth, is do you remember this happening?
You know what? I don't really remember this happening. Not that I get everything from the media, but I don't remember this being over-publicized on the media, which is quite shocking when you hear what actually happened. So no, I just didn't see a lot of it on the news, which was really surprising. But what about you?
Yeah, so I was 16 when this happened, and I remember having a vague conversation about it in business class because I took business, was one of my worst subjects. But I still remember we talked about this in business class, and it was also like who to blame for this event. But it was like looking back to it, it was such an interesting conversation because obviously this was a business class. It was basically like saying like, oh yeah, no, the CEOs aren't to blame for this. It was like really not, what's the word? It was not an empathetic conversation, and we blew past it really quickly. And it just looking back to it, and also just another layer to this, I studied fashion, and this was never mentioned in the 4 years that I studied fashion. I was the one who brought this up, which is just, it's horrendous. Like once we get to the details of it, how much it's overlooked. And even these days, when I say the words Rana Plaza, many people do not know what we're talking about. And obviously my goal is by the end of this episode, all of you will know what Rana Plaza is.
It's quite shocking having that sort of conversation in your business class. It feels very biased and like it wasn't a major event and everything's been just brushed under the rug. But as Marie said, as this all unfold, it's so shocking. And there's so many... I only kind of just kind of looked into what this is since starting the podcast with Marie. I didn't even know what this was. So actually, this is going to be a really valuable episode for people to understand what this is and why we can't let it happen again and why we need to hold people accountable for this kind of thing.
So let's talk about the lead up. The global fashion industry produces more than 100 to 150 billion items of clothing per year. The number of garments produced annually has doubled since 2000 and exceeded 100 billion for the first time in 2014. Clothing consumption has grown at an alarming rate. Over the past 20 years, fashion consumers buy over 8 billion new pieces of clothing every year. This is 400% more than we consumed just 2 decades ago. We've mentioned this before as well, but most of our clothes are made in countries in which workers' rights are limited or even non-existent, with factories that don't have proper safety measures in place. And this is where we get to Rana Plaza. But Rana Plaza was not the first tragedy, nor was it the last. The first big industrial tragedy in the name of fashion in American history, documented, was the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in Manhattan, which happened in 1911. With the death toll of 147 and 78 injured, many whom were young women from an immigrant background. Now, there's a reason why I mentioned the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, and I will circle back to this later. In the 1970s, clothing manufacturing moved away from the United States in search of cheaper labor in developing countries. 100 years after the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, and 1 year before Rana Plaza, the Tazareen factory in Dhaka, Bangladesh, caught fire, killing 117 and injuring 200. On the night of the fire, more than 1,150 people were inside the 8-story building, working overtime shifts to fill orders for various international brands. Fire officials say the fire broke out in open-air ground floor where large amounts of fabric and yarn were illegally stored. Bangladeshi law requires such flammable materials to be stored in a room with fireproof walls. Now, we've talked about this before. Fabric is incredibly flammable.
I mean, it's why these kind of laws exist, to prevent this kind of thing from happening.
The factory lacked a sprinkler system and an exterior fire escape. Employees were supposed to use the interior staircase as fire and toxic smoke filtered up through the building, 3 staircases, and many escaped that way through the burning staircases. But on some floors, managers ordered workers to ignore the fire alarm and stay and work.
If you think about this happening in your own workplace, a lot of office workers have policies in place like health and safety, all sorts of stuff. Imagine your boss saying, ignore that fire alarm, keep working, we don't care. It's absolutely shocking. You're not treated like a person anymore with no rights. They don't care if something happens to you, essentially. The work is valued more than the person, which is it's disgusting. It really, really is.
That same year, on the 11th of September 2012, Ali Enterprises factory that was located in Karachi, Pakistan, burnt down, killing 250 garment workers and injuring 55. The following day, September 12th, another fire broke out at a shoe factory in Lahore, Pakistan, and there were 125 confirmed deaths. All of this loss of life could have been avoided, and this continued negligence led to the worst industrial disaster in the history of the textile industry.
The fact that another fire broke out the next day, there was like no learnings at all from this. Like, if you had witnessed that fire, you would be worried for your own life, thinking, is this going to happen to me? Because I know the conditions here are the same. Like, it's very, very poor. There's no, like, not enough fire escapes. Just, it's scary. You must be incredibly scared as one of them workers working in them conditions, which they have to. That's how they make their living. It's horrible.
Yeah. So let's talk about the disaster. On the 24th of April, 2013, an 8-story commercial building located in Dhaka on the outskirts of Savar, which housed several shops, a bank, and garment factories, collapsed. The factory collapsed with over 3,122 workers inside the building.
And that's not fired. The building just completely collapsed.
Exactly. Let's talk how we actually got there. So, how did this happen? Reports show that Rana Plaza was built on unstable land. The building was built on a filled-in pond, which compromised its structural integrity. Construction rules were ignored, corners were cut in procuring building materials, and officials took bribes to look the other way. The building was never designed to be 8 stories high. The upper 4 floors had been built without a permit. Rana Plaza's architect said that the building was planned for shops and offices, but not factories. Other architects stressed the risk involved in placing factories inside the building designed only for shops and offices, noting the structure was potentially not strong enough to bear the weight and vibrations of heavy machinery.
And especially with fashion, it's heavy sewing machines, it's all sorts of stuff. It's a factory, essentially, so it is going to be heavy machinery.
Yes, sewing machines, especially industrial sewing machines, are a beast. They are extremely heavy, they're extremely powerful, and I can attest to this. When we use our industrial machine in our small studio, everything vibrates in its vicinity because they're so powerful, and that's just one.
And think of how many will be in this factory and how many hours and how many garments they will be making with these machines working at full capacity. This is horrible, but it was almost kind of doomed from the start because of how it was built, because corners were cut. And imagine if you went to work knowing that your building was not stable. You would be scared every day for your life because you're not in a safe space, and everyone has the right to be in a safe space. It's really scary. They must have been so scared. And it's all, again, to cut corners to make more profit. It is disgusting, but it's almost not a tragedy because it would have always happened. It kind of is reminding me of last June when the Ocean Gate sub kind of event happened, and how from the start that sub was doomed because it wasn't manufactured properly. It wasn't manufactured to go the depths it did, and engineers and scientists warned the CEO of OceanGate saying this is a ticking time bomb, this won't work, and it was ignored to cut costs and to just go ahead with it and make profit. So we're still seeing this today, and it's absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, it's a good parallel because it was the same situation. It was all just in the name of money. And unfortunately, the story goes get worse. On the 23rd of April, one day before the collapse, a TV channel recorded footage that shows cracks in the Rana Plaza building. Immediately afterwards, the building was evacuated and the shops and the bank on the lower floors were closed. Later that day, Sol Rana, the owner of the building, said to the media that the building was safe and workers should return.
This is the one part of the story I really remember and sticks with me. This is arguably, I think, the most shocking part, what happens next. Because actually, at this point, yeah, I know we know that the building was already unstable, but at this point, things could have gone so much differently because they got evacuated. They could have been moved away from the danger.
Not only that, managers threatened to withhold a month's pay from workers who refused to come to work. And it has been reported that the owner of the building used hired muscle to force the workers to go to work on the day of the collapse.
When they know their lives were at risk, because if they didn't know anything about the building, about it being unstable, they've seen the cracks, they've been evacuated, they know their lives are at risk now. Imagine being forced to go into an unsafe area, and it's shocking. It really is. No one should be treated like this. And I keep saying, imagine if you were in this situation. I think that's the best way to really emphasize with this and understand how shocking it was and why it can't happen again.
All this leading up to, on April 24th, the Rana Plaza building came crashing down, killing 1,134 people and leaving 2,500 plus injured.
So why did this happen? We know the building was unstable, but what kind of was the tipping point here?
Well, it was the pressure to keep up with the influx of orders from fast fashion brands. This is where we go into something called subcontracting. So a lot of brands try to distance themselves from this tragedy by claiming that they sent their clothes to a safe factory, unaware that their clothes were subcontracted to another factory. That's how a lot of these brands decided to back out of this. And to clarify, subcontracting is a practice of assigning or outsourcing part of the obligation and tasks under a contract to another party, known as a subcontractor.
So would that kind of be like they would send it to another factory just to, say, cut the material? That would be like their sole thing to do. Or one factory was, you're going to dye these tops that will then get sent back to the main factory. Things like that.
Yes, exactly. Because these deadlines are so tight and fast fashion is so fast-paced, manufacturers subcontract certain production processes to other factories without informing the brand. So a brand itself might hire one company not knowing that they're actually hiring 4 or 5 in the process.
It's adding more like kind of layers to the manufacturing process and then covering that up. It's why you see things like this was made in Italy, and it could be one part of, say, a bag. It could be the zip of the bag was made in Italy and then other parts were made all over the world. But we don't know that. We just think it was all crafted in Italy.
Yeah, exactly. This is often also due to high demand for certain products. The companies selling an item of clothing may suddenly double their order and expect it within the same delivery time. Forced overtime is common. Most workers in the garment industry work on temporary, insecure, or informal contracts. I also read a story where most garment workers pay for their own sewing machine and their first wages are used to pay back that same sewing machine. So they're not even making a profit because they're forced to buy the sewing machine that they're working on. And that's another way how they cut costs.
It is disgusting. It's all about cutting costs and not treating these people as people at all. They are part of the machine, essentially. But I think it's really disgusting that the brand's first response to this was, oh, we don't want anything to do with this. We don't want people to know that essentially they've contributed to this problem happening, because this factory wouldn't hire workers if there was no demand. And I definitely agree with that we shouldn't put all the responsibility on the individual, but this is definitely something that we can do, is remove our demand, because these guys won't make money. They want to make as much money as they can. If we stop the demand, they'll be like, there's no point making this, there is no demand. Again, the power of kind of our wallet. So it's not all about the consumer, but we definitely play a part in this. That's what I wanted to say, is we do play a part in this. It's not all on us, but we should still be accountable.
Definitely. Most of these brands distance themselves from this strategy by saying, we hired perfectly safe factories and we had no idea that they were being produced, all our clothes were being produced in unregulated factories. This is on us. About 29 global brands were implicated in the Rana Plaza disaster. Among them are our old friends Inditex, which is Zara, JCPenney, Kik, Benetton, Mango, Primark, The Children's Place, and Walmart.
Now, I think this might be because, well, I've been in the kind of sustainability community for a few years now, but talking to people who are a bit more distant from it than I clearly am, people don't understand that these big companies own a lot of brands. People think Zara's just its own thing. Inditex own, I believe, Zara, Stradivarius, H&M. Like, they own...
Not H&M, but Massimo Dutti.
Yes, they own quite a few of them. And correct me if I'm wrong, they're probably going to all do the same thing of do this outsourcing to different factories.
Oh, yeah. They're produced in the same location.
Yeah.
And that also goes for not just fast fashion brand, high-end brands. More than likely manufactured next to the trousers from Primark.
But that's kind of the trick. And I mean, this is coming from someone who I always used to think it's high end, which means it's higher quality. So even when I was first getting to say sustainability, I was like, well, surely I should invest in something high end because then it will last longer than fast fashion pieces. But you're right. Some of these pieces are produced in the exact same place. It's like in the UK, we have a lot of different supermarkets and some are cheaper than others. And actually, they all usually source their, like, for example, fruit and veg from the same place. The only difference is M&S and the higher end brands might get first dibs of everything, but it's still the same thing. But you would go maybe to M&S and Waitrose because you want, it's this better quality of stuff, and it's like, it's not, it's from the same place. It's a trick.
Exactly. And I think many people don't know about this. And it's because it's just not common knowledge. And like, you expect if you pay more money, you expect better value. And that is not the case, especially when it comes to the fashion industry. Several of these brands paid multi-million-dollar settlements to the families of those affected by the disaster. However, many brands also refused to take accountability, with several failing to pay up and refusing to disclose how much they actually paid to garment workers and their families.
So these poor families are not getting justice for this tragedy that shouldn't have happened and was caused by these brands, which I can't even imagine how these families must feel. There's no, you're mourning a loss and there's no justice for it. It's just brushed under the carpet, which it's just stabbing the wound, really. It's horrible. Imagine if you lost someone in a disaster like that, and then brands just go, no, we don't care. What? Not our problem. You get no justice for it. You get no nothing. You're left with nothing.
And it's not like they can't afford to pay. Zara is like the highest, like Inditex is the highest earning fashion brand in the world. Like the CEO is the richest person in fashion.
That is my biggest, like, one of my things where it just really gets on my nerves is they have the money to spare. It's pure greed. It really is. And that's what it is at this point in late stage capitalism, is it's greed.
There's, I don't want to say some good news, but I actually did not know about this because I thought he got off scot-free. But the owner of the building, Sol Rana, has faced years of prison and time on several charges of misconduct and is currently on trial for the murder of the workers. Slightly sadder news, it does look like he might get away with it.
He's responsible for mass murder.
I mean, the trial's still ongoing, but like based on just what I've read so far, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but unfortunately, it's not optimistic.
Is this a recent trial or is this...
It's ongoing. Like, this is 10 years after, and this murder trial is still ongoing.
Surely, though, like, there's no argument here at all, but then they managed to get away with it.
The tragedy sparked worldwide outrage and was covered by many media outlets, but unfortunately, a few months later, it was old news. And as we said, we barely heard about this when this happened. And the world just went back to consuming cheap clothes, with some notable exceptions.
This is what we found, especially we were talking last time about Shein, is it's amazing how you could tell people horror stories about how their clothes are produced and why them buying from these places is causing more horrors to continue, and people will still continue to buy. We've almost become numb to this, and I think I've talked to you about this a lot. This is where like I'm just completely stumped sometimes in how we can communicate this to people. I have friends that still shop with fast fashion and they kind of say, oh, Beth, I'm sorry, I feel bad, I did this and this. And even still, I sometimes struggle to have these conversations with people because I can't believe that, one, they might not know about this, but two, even when they do know about this, it doesn't feel like a big deal. It's so far away from people that they don't care.
Important to note that this is pre-Shein. So Shein came after this. It started a whole new, I want to say, genre, because it's not fast fashion anymore. We talked about this. It's ultra fast fashion. So like this happened, and then companies like Shein are still making a profit and are still extremely popular around among consumers.
And it just got worse.
It got worse. Yeah.
So obviously we've kind of talked about the fact that it was talked about on the media, but it was very fleeting. So what is the sustainable fashion, slow fashion community doing? Because this is why we're doing the episode.
This birthed a little nonprofit called Fashion Revolution. So Fashion Revolution was founded by Carrie Summers and Ursula de Castro in the wake of the Rana Plaza disaster in 2013. They have become the world's largest fashion activism movement, mobilizing citizens, brands, and policymakers through research, education, and advocacy. Fashion Revolution, as I mentioned, is an NGO, a non-government organization, starting Fashion Revolution Week, which marks the anniversary of the tragedy.
I know about this because I've seen the Who Made My Clothes campaign. I don't know if anyone else has seen that online, and they do that every year. And that kind of calls out brands and encourages consumers to think about where their clothes came from, kind of like the episode we did in season 1 called Who Made My Turtleneck.
Heavily inspired.
So thank you very much, Fashion Revolution. But even when we did that episode, we took the time to really focus on it. And your research was amazing. You went so in depth. And this is why we were saying at the start of the episode to like love your clothes a bit more. They have stories. They were made by someone, because we've said before, we think about clothes as almost like single-use plastic that we can chuck away, when they absolutely aren't.
Also, we shouldn't be chucking away single-use plastic, but that just shows like the disposable mentality we've come in. It is a genius campaign because it's so simple and all of us can get involved. It is very simple. You can just go to the Fashion Revolution website and just download their template, and you can download a piece of paper that says "Who Made My Clothes," or you can write it on cardboard or do whatever. And they've recently expanded it to "What's in My Clothes" as well. That was, I think, their campaign last year, because Fashion Revolution was born out of the need for advocating for labor rights. But obviously, as we discussed, the fashion industry has also a heavy tax on the planet. So now they're also diving into addressing the environmental consequences of the fashion industry, and heavily relying on them for this episode. They're an absolutely great resource. And I'm not going to hold it against them that they rejected me for a job. But if anyone's listening, hey, I'm really good at what I do.
She's available. But yes, definitely follow Fashion Revolution. What they're doing is absolutely fantastic and inspires me and Marie every day. But you kind of got me thinking there when we were talking about the Who Made My Clothes campaign. I was listening to a slow fashion podcast and they were talking about how clothes have almost kind of evolved into now becoming content. So they're not even clothes anymore. They are a piece of content to be captured and then put online or printed or whatever. And it accelerates that distance between the person who made it, you wearing it, and then it's ended up in the digital space. And actually, I've seen people online go, well, I can't wear this again because I've already got a picture on my Instagram feed of me wearing this. People will think like I have no outfits. And especially, I guess, if you're kind of a fashion influencer, that is what your content is. It's you wearing different clothes. So it's really weird. It's evolved from being a piece of clothing. It's to be worn for content. And I think that's so sad. It makes it's virtual. It doesn't feel real anymore.
I read an article about this. I don't know if it's the current state, but at one point, the Instagram algorithm itself wasn't promoting images if you had the same outfit on. Like they would only promote new stuff on your feed when you had a new outfit on. And that encouraged influencers to always post new outfits. I remember an influencer talking about this where she's like, I had to like buy clothes and then return them the next day because if I posted a photo in the same dress, the algorithm wouldn't promote it.
I can't believe that. I do marketing and I didn't even know that.
Yeah, this was now a while back, so I'm not sure if it's still a thing, but yeah, I remember reading this article.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I really, really wouldn't. But I mean, this is a separate conversation, but the rate we are digesting content, it must be exhausting for people having to come up with new outfits, with new clothes. Everyone constantly wants content. And I am a content creator. I work in it. It's really exhausting. Like, it's not slow content anymore. It's people want a new piece of content every minute. It's why Reels and TikTok is sometimes quite, and this is quite ironic because I do make TikToks and Instagram, they're quite damaging because you have a short attention span and you want a new piece of content every 2 seconds. And I really do think we are starting to treat clothes like content, which is, it's a shame because we're much more than content. There's so much more to life outside of content, which is really hard for me to grasp sometimes because my whole career and even what me and Maria are doing now, we're essentially making content, but there is life outside of content.
No, that is like, well, I mean, a very valid point. And it just shows like the narrative of today. It's like, I mean, like social media has become an integral part of today's society, and it's important to note that this happened before really social media took off. It's like social media is still quite a fairly new thing. I don't even know, like I know Facebook was around, but I'm not sure if Instagram was already around when this happened.
I think it was, but it was back in the day when Instagram was pretty pictures of food and cats and the ocean, and there was no reels, and it was just probably a social media manager's dream. And it's like you said before that this was before Shein as well, which is scary. This was already a massive problem. So Marie, we've talked about Fashion Revolution, which is incredible. And you also mentioned that what they're doing with their movement is they're kind of looking to make new policies happen, which I think a lot of the stuff we've seen, that's how change happens. It's through policies, it's through new laws being introduced. So after this whole thing happened, brands stepped away, Fashion Revolution started. What then kind of came out of that?
So what came about it was what I like to call the birth of the Accords. After the Rana Plaza factory building collapse, more than 200 international apparel brands and Bangladeshi trade unions came together to sign and this is a bit of a mouthful, Bangladesh Fire and Safety Accord, an independent legal contract that ensures workplace safety standards across all ready-made garment factories. The accord addressed concerns measuring to help prevent events like Rana Plaza from happening in the future. In particular, it constructed a fire and building safety program built upon three-step process of inspection, remediation, and safety training. The governance of the accord was designed, sorry, this is very legal and technical, but it is important. The governance of the accord was designed to equally represent trade unions and companies in order to fully support and standardize the existing manufacturers of the garment manufacturing.
So how kind of legally, I don't know much about laws, by the way. I'm coming at this from like, I know nothing. How kind of legally binding is this accord? So if you adopted this and signed it, how like binding is it? Can they like get out of it? Are there loopholes, or is it like, no, you have to make sure you do all this stuff now?
So yeah, so I'm not a lawyer, but it is a legally binding agreement, but it's not a law. That is important to note. So if you sign it, you are legally accountable, but it's not a law. And the reason for that is because the accord, well, the idea of the courts is to stretch across other countries, and different countries have different laws. I mean, I think the only like frame of reference I can use here is, do you remember the Sokovia Accords from the MCU?
I love that we've brought in the MCU. Yes, I do.
So the Sokovia Accords were designed to regulate superhero and superhero activities. And of course, that led into the events of Civil War. Sorry, I'm giving a history of the MCU here.
This is brilliant. This is a brilliant parallel. I now completely understand what you're talking about. And then that spread to all countries because obviously like they had different laws and different superheroes. And that's brilliant. I love that.
And in the end, like Captain America had to go on the run. Hawkeye was arrested because they broke the Sokovia Accords.
Perfect. Perfection, Marie. Your nerdiness is paying off. That now makes complete sense. That's fantastic.
And then I think it's important to note, though, that signing this agreement is voluntarily. So like brands cannot be forced to sign this agreement, which has been an issue, and some extreme notable brands haven't signed it. So to backtrack a little, because the accords also had a limited time frame, so they were set to expire. So in August 2021, the accord, after a lot of campaigning and NGOs and by consumers, I was one of them, was renewed. But it was like, I still remember I was really stressed about this because this was like, it passed by like a margin. Like so many people wanted to let the accords die. And then it was renamed to the International Accord on Health and Safety, because originally it was only for Bangladesh, but now they want to spread it to other countries, mainly Pakistan, which, as I mentioned at the start of this episode, also has quite a few tragedies in its past in the name of fashion.
I'm quite shocked that it only just passed in 2021 after hearing all of this. And also, like, I remember you writing an absolutely fantastic article on this, and I think that's what introduced me to Rana Plaza and the Accords. And I was shocked reading it. And you'd think it's a no-brainer to pass these accords. I don't understand why you wouldn't do this. It's basically asking for more tragedies like this to happen. We shouldn't have to campaign for things like this. That's what hurts the most, but we do.
Yeah, and they were set to expire in 2020, but because of, the world going crazy, they were given an extension and then eventually renewed. The International Accord for Health and Safety in the Textile Garment Industry took effect officially on the 1st of September 2021. So this is a legally binding program which garment brands can sign to ensure the garment factories in the supply chain are made safe. The International Accord is governed by a steering committee which consists of 50% brand representatives and 50% union representatives. Labor rights NGOs have signed on as witness and participate in the steering committee as observers.
So Marie, how does this accord protect garment workers? What are some of the kind of rules, if you will, of this accord?
So the International Accord is the only existing binding agreement to protect garment workers by informing workers and local trade unions about the right to safe and healthy workplace, mandating safety training programs for workers, mandating safety protection in workplace like fire exits, independent and regular inspections of factories to ensure they're safe, empowering workers to raise complaints about the safety of their workplace with independent board without risking their jobs. As of recording this episode, there are 176 signatories on the international accord. Companies, and this may surprise you, companies that have signed the accord include Esprit, Inditex, which covers, as we spoke about, Zara, Bershka, Massimo Dutti, Pull & Bear, Next, Primark, and River Island. Companies that haven't signed the accord are brands like Amazon, Disney, Jack Wolfskin, Patagonia, and Levi's. And those last two might surprise you.
I saw a lot of noise about this recently. I think like people calling them like the dirty dozen or something. I was so surprised by Patagonia and Levi's, considering Patagonia, I think a year or two ago, the owner basically said we're donating all our profits to like green charities and climate action and stuff. And then Levi's is a huge one. They're always about like inclusivity and stuff like that. It's almost off brand for them to not sign this. And it just really makes you think you can't trust any brand. You need to annoyingly, you need to do your research, because this is huge. If they don't care about this, they don't care about you, and they certainly don't care about the planet. This is a big one. This is like dating someone. This is the biggest red flag. If you are going out to date some clothes, the biggest walking red flag is if they've not signed this accord. There you go. Red flags with brands. Look out for them, people.
Yeah, and the reason they haven't signed it is the excuse that they're giving is we're not doing anything shady, so why should we sign it?
But we don't know that. And
exactly. It's like, if you're not doing something shady, you should sign it.
Yeah. Show me the receipts. I want to know. You can so easily hide the manufacture process. If you truly were doing nothing shady, you'd be like, cool, all the cards on the table. What are you hiding, Disney? What are you hiding, Patagonia?
Well, I know what Disney is hiding. I mean, Disney's a whole other subject.
Maybe that's a whole episode.
Exactly. But I think it was Levi's that said, it's we have our own independent auditing, so it doesn't matter. Don't need the accords, which once again, that's not suspicious at all.
But also, surely this makes you way more credible. If you signed this, I would be way more trusting of this brand. It's brownie points, if anything. It's not a bad thing. So if they don't sign, it's well, clearly you're not up to scratch then. It's not because you don't want to, because it's always going to be a bonus with consumers to go, we've signed this accord and we actually care about our workers and everything. I don't think will be a consumer who goes, oh, they Patagonia signed that accord. Ugh, red flag, don't like them, what an ick. No, that's never going to happen. It's always, I hate thinking like this, but it's a USP. It's a bonus. I know a lot of people go and buy something, maybe because it's affordable, maybe because it's nice. And then if the bonus is, it's also sustainable, people are like, oh, brilliant, nice. That's a nice little extra. Yeah, it's kind of unbelievable, really. I saw that online. I was very, very shocked.
But also, just it is important to note, signing the accords does not make you a saint, because the ones that does sign it are still pretty bad as well, because Primark has signed it as well. They're a terrible fast fashion brand.
I mean, Zara on there as well.
Zara as well.
Inditex have signed it, which is, don't get us wrong, it's an amazing step. It's brilliant, but it doesn't mean they don't have other sustainable sins, as we've talked about before.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And there are also workarounds as well. So, as we also mentioned, rich people can get away with a lot of shit.
Unless you put them in a faulty submarine.
December 2022, the accords expanded to Pakistan. It has currently 111 signatories. But it's also very important to note that even though the accords exist, sadly, tragedies still continue to happen. Now, we are recording this episode on the 21st of March, and we've already had 2 disasters this year. This information shocks you, Beth, because this wasn't covered in the media at all.
Sorry, it's why I went quiet. I was really, really, really shocked. And I'm not shocked, obviously, by this not put in the media at all. I mean, the original tragedy wasn't really covered, so I'm not surprised that these aren't either. People don't want to know. But so you said 2 disasters that have already happened this year.
On the 14th of January, there was a fire in a footwear factory in Bawana, India. 29 firefighters were needed to bring a fire under control in a footwear factory. Fortunately, there were no casualties. The fire broke out late in the evening, and this is why they suspect there wasn't no casualties. The cause of the fire was unknown. And then also on the 18th of January, in the Yadin factory in Cambodia, 1 garment worker was killed and 21 were injured when a fire broke out in a chemical warehouse laundry room, according to reports. The fire was caused by explosion from chemicals and dyes used in the company's processes and an electrical fault. 15 fire engines were needed to subdue the fire that broke out at 6:30 a.m., and it took until 9:50 a.m. to bring the fire under control.
What's really sad about this, and I'm really cool, and I did loads of like fire safety policies as part of like starting various like new jobs. How they deliver them is very boring, by the way. It's a shame because this information is out there about how fires start, how to prevent them, what's flammable. All this information is out there, yet these things still happen, and they really shouldn't happen this often. That's what surprises me. Like, I understand that they happen, but they shouldn't happen this often. There are things that can be done to properly minimize this stuff from happening. It is disgusting. It really, really is. These people shouldn't have to work in these conditions at all. They're practically risking their lives every day to go into work, which they have to go and do.
Yeah, I mean, it's pure negligence. It's not like the information is unknown. And it's also, as we keep saying, it's to cut costs. It's for you to buy that top for £5 so you can look trendy. Sorry if this sounds harsh, but this is the reason. This is why this negligence happens, because the fashion industry is an incredibly profiting industry and you can make a lot of money from it. But unfortunately, extreme consequences to that. But because we say this all the time, out of mind, out of sight, people just don't care.
These fast fashion companies have also now created this expectation that clothes should be cheap. Like, people now think a normal price for a garment is expensive because they're like, well, I should only be paying like £5 for this. It's like, that was never normal. And I've fallen victim to that too. It does create this narrative where you're like, well, clothes are cheap. They're cheap to make. Cheap. I shouldn't have to pay more than £5 for this because I can go get it new from this place. People are expecting these prices now, and it's never been normal. It's not how really, it's not the price of garments. The workers and the supply chain has been squeezed to an extreme amount to make these clothes unrealistically cheap. So I think even like listening to this, if you can kind of start talking about how clothes shouldn't be £5 and kind of start changing your mindset and thinking, okay, if I were to make this is how much it would cost. And I know it's a different scenario, but I think trying to get out of that narrative is something you can do, and it's really, really helpful. And it just goes there back to valuing your clothes more. So that's kind of part of the problem as well, really.
No, that is an absolute fabulous point. And it's like, I've seen that myself because I work for a sustainable fashion brand. And I still remember once we posted a photo of a pair of trousers. And of course, we listed the price as €120. And someone commented, oh, you added an extra zero. And we're just like, we couldn't even begin to produce these trousers at €12. Like, it's just impossible. It wouldn't cover the material alone. People are conditioned to see clothes at that price. And then that raises another point, because somebody will say, well, what if I can't pay €120 on trousers, which is a valid point. But then it's more of a socio-economic point because, well, why is the reason you can't afford that? That's probably because of cost of living. They're like facet to this. And, well, people should be able to afford clothes, but they can't.
Yeah, and that is another really, really good point. So it kind of all goes against each other, really. But it's why we're having this conversation, just to change people's mindset a little bit, to start seeing clothes as a valuable thing that was made by someone rather than, prices and the single-use mindset, essentially.
And if you want to know more about this, the Clean Clothes campaign actually has, which is another really good NGO that you should be following. But I got this all from their timeline. So they have a timeline on their website where they have documented all the people that have been killed, injured in the global garment industry since 2001 onwards. And the timeline itself chronicles around 107 incidents since January 2021. And the timeline includes factory incidents in all countries not covered under the Accords. So to put this in perspective, in 2023 alone, 72 people were killed and 122 people were injured in garment, textile, and related factories, all in the name of cheap clothes. And this isn't an overseas problem. There's sweatshops found across the world, from Los Angeles to Leicester, which is why it's so important to expand the reach of the Accords and keep garment workers safe. However, this is only a band-aid and not a solution.
So, Marie, you mentioned at the start of the episode the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, which you said is considered one of the deadliest industrial disasters in US history. You said you're going to backtrack to that. Let's talk more about that.
I'm so glad you brought this up because this is a fascinating case study. So the reason I mentioned the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire was of what happened after. The next several decades saw the creation of laws and regulations to protect the health and safety of workers. Within 4 years of the fire, New York had the strongest labor laws in all of America. The laws that were passed in the wake of the disaster are still in action today and saved thousands of lives. In the US, there hasn't been a disaster as deadly as Triangle since.
I mean, what you're referring to there, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, that is huge. When I was doing my health and safety training, we learnt about that in the workplace. So these kind of things do work and can happen, as kind of evidenced by this case study. This is a success story, if anything.
It is, and there are some notes, of course, because as I mentioned in the 70s, the majority of garment factories moved away from the US, so that might also play into the statistics. It's always important to see the bigger picture, but it also is other workplace strategies outside the garment industry haven't happened either. A similar story to Fashion Revolution, a group of people saw this happen, they said never again, and they set laws in place. We've done this before, we can do it again. It is possible. And as I mentioned, the US is by no means perfect. There are sweatshops still found in the US, but it was a step in the right direction. And this movement was absolutely huge. Triangle is such a fascinating case study to talk about, and also just what it sparked and what it led to.
Absolutely. I'm really glad you brought this case study up, because obviously we kind of do these episodes and they do tend to get a bit depressing, but it's always good to look at a real life situation that has worked. I know it's in a different context, in a different place. It's not perfect, but it shows, like Marie said, that things are possible. And that's why we need to be talking about this, getting involved, because we can make these changes. So Marie, after learning about all of this, and by the way, amazingly researched, absolutely fascinating, what do we do now? Where can we go from here? How can consumers get involved in this?
So there are several ways. I mentioned some already. Follow Fashion Revolution, Clean Clothes Campaign, and Remake for updates and campaigns within the labor rights movement. Those are the top 3 NGOs you should be keeping track on. They're on all social medias. Their websites are amazing. They have blogs, articles. They're an amazing resource. And if you want more small, digestible content, you can also follow them on social.
Their Instagram is absolutely fantastic. Even people like me understand from what they're posting. It's very digestible content. There's even the odd meme, which I also appreciate, but it's a really good way of communicating this to people. And as Marie will probably go on to say, it being on social, it's so shareable. Now, I always say when you share information on social, read it first and actually understand it before you share with people, because this is what we're very conscious of. The worst thing you can do is spread misinformation, but you can inspire your circles around you. How many people have social media? Most people have social media. Most people will look at your stories. It's why I've decided to use it's not even personal. The only social media I have is my Instagram, and I choose to use it to maybe talk about what food I'm eating, but also to talk about this kind of stuff. So I'm directly inspiring the circles around me. So the first best thing you can do, like Marie said, is in whatever way you feel comfortable digesting media. If that is a step one, that is what you should do, is follow these NGOs. They are fantastic.
You say like the worry about spreading misinformation. Well, that's the beauty of Fashion Revolution's campaign, because it encourages you to get involved, but encourages you to get involved by asking questions. You don't need to be an expert in the fashion industry to take part in Fashion Revolution's campaign. It is a simple question: who made my clothes? So the idea is that you post a photo of yourself holding up a sign saying, who made my clothes? And then just tag every single fast fashion brand there is underneath the sun and ask them, who made my clothes?
It's brilliant. It's user-generated content. I mean, brands love user-generated content. Like if you got a Starbucks, you usually go, hi at Starbucks, I've had my morning brew. You can do that in a more direct way as well. It doesn't have to be praising them. You can also create content that challenges them. You can literally tag their account. It's beautiful. And actually a lot of Fashion Revolution's posts are really good because they encourage you to tag these fast fashion brands in their comments. So or go on like Zara's account and tag fast fashion and kind of try and get a conversation started. And I know that, the Zara account probably won't see your comment, but if more people do it, they will. And that is the power of social media, and I think how we should be using it.
Exactly. That's the beauty. It takes like 2 seconds to just have your voice heard. And also there are several petitions in circulation. Clean Clothes campaign is really good of keeping you updated of current petitions that are currently active. Another resource that I have mentioned a lot is Good On You, which rates how sustainable and how ethical a brand is. And if you scroll down on Good On You, they even provide you a template that you can use to email a brand telling them you want them to be more sustainable. It takes like 2 seconds. All you need to do is sign your name and send it off. It's a numbers game, like Beth pointed out. The more people do it, the better it is. And my advice is just be annoying. Just be a pain. Be relentless. Just these people have extreme amounts of money and they're not using it for the greater good. So just be a pain.
This is the one time where you can actually be annoying. And I completely agree with it, because they have this platform that they're inviting people to comment on. Go do it. Don't obviously like shout absolute horrible abuse, because there's probably someone on social media like me behind it. But at the same time, be annoying, be relentless, keep commenting, keep this conversation going. That's the worst thing we can do, is let this drop. We need them to know that there's almost a demand for this. We are demanding this change like we demand clothes, we demand certain styles. If we put that demand into this, what we could do would be absolutely amazing. I mean, I'm seeing at the moment lots of changes happening with people boycotting brands at the moment. I'm seeing recently almost like a boycotting movement with brands in response to what's happening in Gaza at the moment. And that is so powerful, and it really is working. If we did that with fast fashion brands, boycotted them in the same way, we could make some serious changes, because we're telling them we're not spending our money there anymore. And if they want our money, they're going to have to make changes. And they will, because they're profit hungry, greedy bastards.
Exactly. And then another great resource is a website called Rana Plaza Never Forget. That's where I got the majority of the Accords information from. And then I just also I never stop shouting out this book, but there is also Dana Thomas's Fashionopolis. As I said, if you follow me on social, you are already aware of this book. It is the #1 book I recommend when it comes to learning about the fast fashion industry. And she has an entire section dedicated to Rana Plaza, where she also interviewed survivors. I have to say, it is harrowing. It is a pretty hard read, but I do highly recommend this book. And then, of course, like the last thing you can do to get involved, and I have to shout us out here, share this episode. Use it to start conversations. If you have that one friend who keeps buying fast fashion and you don't know how to have that difficult conversation with them, share this episode.
I don't know how anyone else consumes podcasts. I'll be cooking dinner or cleaning or something. I'll put it on. Send it to your friend and go, oh, you're going on a run, you're going for a walk. Just want something to listen to. Stick this on. It's quite good, if I do say so myself. Please pick us up.
Thank you so much for listening. Join the Sustainable Support Group by following us on our social media. We have Twitter and Instagram. You can follow me personally on Life on Mars and Beth
on Sustainable.
You can also find us now on YouTube. If you want to know more about today's topic or any other topic we have covered on the pod, check out our Down the Rabbit Hole playlist. And let me tell you, this one is gonna be stacked. We are also proud members of the PodPack Collective, a group of indie podcasters striving to create positive space of support and collaboration within the indie podcasting community. We are thrilled to be included in with the extremely talented group, along with Chatsunami, Nerdstalgic Podcast, Review It Yourself, Casting Views, Weird Horizons, the Game Club Podcast, and Seismic Cinema. You can check them out on our PodPack Collective playlist over on YouTube, and we also recently just did a collaboration with Chatsunami, so you can check that out in our collaborations playlist. Once again, thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you again soon.
Howdy beans, and welcome to my podcast trailer. Now you're probably wondering, who's this weird English fella talking to me about beans? Well, great question. I am the host of the Nerdstalgic Podcast, Luke the Human. Nice to meet you, hope you're doing well, hope you're all good, as always. Now, you're probably wondering, what is the Nerdstalgic Podcast? Well, another good question, let me answer that for you. The Nerdstalgic Podcast is a variety podcast talking about all things nerdy and nostalgic, from books to video games to movies to TV shows. Basically, if it is nerdy, and even if it just has the smidge, the hint of nerdism to it, rest assured I will cover it. I'm on all platforms from Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and YouTube. All you gotta do is search Nerdstalgic Podcast and you'll find me. So I hope to see you there really soon.